The case of Caleb Turner, an 8-year-old American boy living in the city of Salem, Virginia, began discreetly, almost imperceptibly, until a simple pediatric consultation drew the attention of healthcare professionals. Caleb was seen by neighbors as a quiet child, diligent in school, with a typical routine for the region. He walked with his mother to the school bus stop, played in the backyard with the neighbors' dogs, and spent afternoons doing homework at the small table tucked against the living room window. Nothing suggested anything out of the ordinary until, during a routine exam, he pulled down the collar of his shirt and pointed to the elongated mark on his left shoulder, saying with disconcerting naturalness, "In the other life, this is where the blade went in." The pediatrician, Dr. Rebecca Price, reported that the phrase was uttered without hesitation, with complete objectivity. The mark, an irregular nevus with a dark border, had been with Caleb since birth. His parents, Anna and Michael Turner, always believed it to be purely dermatological. However, that unexpected sentence brought to the surface something the family had been ignoring for years. The boy had sporadically and spontaneously commented that he had been hit before, and that, "The other time I ran, but I couldn't make it to the bridge." These comments always surfaced in moments of calm, usually in the early morning hours, while he ate plain waffles prepared by his father before heading to school. His mother remembered a specific occasion when Caleb, at just 5 years old, touched the mark on his own shoulder and said, "It was fast. I fell near the water." The family initially attributed such phrases to childhood imagination. But when the episodes began to repeat, some accompanied by nightmares and abrupt awakenings, Anna decided to research. That's when she found extensive references to the work of Canadian psychiatrist Ian Stevenson, who, throughout the 20th century, documented hundreds of cases of children who claimed to remember moments from previous lives, often accompanied by birthmarks corresponding to fatal injuries. Following this, an American university team familiar with Stevenson's protocols was contacted. The initial interest arose from the combination of 3 central elements: the mark on the shoulder, the spontaneous statements, and the recurrence of themes related to pursuit, water, and a penetrating wound. In the first formal interview, conducted at the Turner family home, Caleb was sitting next to the children's bookcase, flipping through a school atlas. Without any prior stimulus, he commented, looking fixedly at a drawing of a rural road. There, the houses were too close to each other. And there was always the smell of smoke in the air. The team immediately recorded the phrase, following Stevenson's methodology. No leading questions, no suggested hypotheses. Only observation, recording, and later comparison. At that point, all they had was the beginning of a clinical case. But the boy's spontaneity, precision, and serenity in speaking aroused a cautious interest. The elements were too consistent to be ignored. The team that took on Caleb's case decided to maintain a steady rhythm of short interviews, always conducted in a neutral environment and without external stimuli. Following the methodology popularized by Ian Stevenson, the central rule for each session was to record only what emerged spontaneously. Nothing would be suggested, nothing would be induced. The goal was to preserve the purity of the memories should they indeed be anomalous. In the first recordings, Caleb demonstrated an unusual calmness when speaking of elements that did not belong to his current life in Salem. He described, with direct simplicity, a place where the houses were crowded and the men wore heavy clothes full of dust and smoke. He did not use childish metaphors, nor did he dramatize. His sentences were short, linear, almost clinical in their precision. During one of the interviews, while fitting together pieces of a puzzle, he stopped, touched his marked shoulder, and said, "I felt it going in. Then I was on the ground." The tone was neutral, without a hint of fear. His father, sitting a few feet away, took a deep breath, visibly shaken. The team noted the reaction. This type of statement, objective and seemingly detached from emotion, corresponded to the pattern observed by Stevenson in various countries. Caleb's behavior at school also began to raise internal discussions among teachers. The principal reported that, during a class about small American villages from the early 20th century, the boy raised his hand without being called upon and commented, "Where I was, everyone ran when the smoke came down." The teacher, disconcerted, described the moment as an unexpected silence from the class, as if no one knew how to react. The scientific team took note immediately. Nothing in the lesson dealt with conflict, persecution, or violence. As in the cases described by Stevenson, the information had appeared out of context, without stimulus, without an obvious link to the school subject matter. In addition to his speech, there were the drawings. Caleb repeatedly produced sketches of a curved wooden bridge over a narrow river. The researchers asked his mother for an old box where she kept drawings since the boy was 5 years old. The bridge appeared in at least 7 of them, always with small variations, but maintaining central characteristics: a sharp curve, a simple railing, and houses concentrated immediately after the bank. An episode recorded during a family outing reinforced the team's interest. One late afternoon, while walking near the Roanoke River, Caleb suddenly stopped upon seeing an old, renovated bridge. He held his mother's arm and murmured, "The other one was burning." He added, "Nothing more." The phrase was immediately noted. It was consistent with several previous mentions of smoke and intense heat. His behavior in noisy environments also drew attention. His mother reported that at school parties or places with abrupt sounds, Caleb would hunch his body and bring his hand to his shoulder as if reacting to an invisible signal. This type of involuntary response frequently appeared in Stevenson's studies as an emotional residue of extreme situations supposedly lived in another existence. Up to that point, the researchers had a solid set of fragments: spontaneous memories, persistent images of pursuit and fire, the physical mark corresponding to a penetrating wound, and a child with no prior exposure to similar stories. It was the beginning of a case that, to be taken seriously, now needed to move on to the historical comparison phase. With the growing collection of spontaneous accounts, the team moved on to the next stage: historical comparison. This process followed exactly the model applied by Ian Stevenson over decades. First recording everything the child said, then checking if any possible past life presented a concrete correspondence with these elements. No hypothesis would be formulated before the data was clearly organized. The team began by analyzing the drawings accumulated since the age of 5, the curved bridge, the houses close to each other, the narrow streets, and the recurrent presence of smoke. Unlike Salem, where Caleb lived, these architectural characteristics did not correspond to the local urban pattern, which consisted of more distant houses, large yards, and wide streets, typical of small American towns. This discrepancy reinforced the need to investigate locations from another era and context. During one of the recorded interviews, Caleb was calmly flipping through a science book when he commented, without any stimulus, "That place always smelled of smoke. It wasn't like here." He spoke like someone describing a vivid memory, not an invention. The researchers instantly noted the phrase. This type of sensory precision, recorded in various Stevenson investigations, was treated as a potential indicator of anomalous memory. The parents, in turn, began to notice a pattern in the nocturnal episodes. Caleb would wake up some nights gasping, saying short phrases like, "They came from the side." On one occasion reported by the father, the boy was sitting in bed, his eyes still half closed, and said, "I tried to run on the bridge, but the smoke got there first." After the phrase, he lay down again and went back to sleep. The emotional neutrality with which these memories emerged was something Stevenson considered typical, a combination of objectivity and fragmentation, without dramatization. In light of this set of information, the researchers decided to conduct a neutral comparative test, a procedure widely documented in Stevenson's academic literature. They separated historical photographs from different regions of the world, mixing irrelevant images with others that contained elements vaguely similar to Caleb's descriptions. The photos were presented without identification, explanation, or context, in order to eliminate any possibility of suggestion. Caleb's reaction was noted with care. He calmly observed the images one by one. Faced with landscapes without any resemblance to his accounts, he remained indifferent. But when he reached the old photograph of a small village destroyed in the early 20th century, light stone houses, narrow streets, and a wooden bridge near a river, his expression changed slightly. He didn't smile, nor was he surprised. He just touched the mark on his own shoulder and said, "Before I fell, I was near here." The phrase was immediately documented. The team did not respond, nor did they ask questions. This type of reaction, direct and specific, appearing only in the presence of a compatible image, reinforced the need to deepen the historical comparison. Up to that point, the case presented four important pillars: an injury corresponding to a birthmark, consistent sensory memories, spontaneous maps and drawings since early childhood, and specific reactions to neutral visual stimuli. The case began to demand a deeper investigation into historical and military records that could support or refute the possibility of correspondence with a violently ended life. From the moment the patterns began to repeat with consistency, the team decided to deepen the historical investigation. The method applied was the same that Ian Stevenson had used throughout his career: identify central elements in the child's accounts and verify if they corresponded to real events, places, or individuals. Before that, however, it was necessary to organize the data provided by Caleb, always respecting Stevenson's fundamental principle: no hypothesis must precede the evidence. The researchers listed the most recurrent points: houses very close together, narrow streets, a curved wooden bridge, constant smoke in the air, and the presence of men in thick, dirty clothes. None of these elements corresponded to the child's current environment in Salem, where detached houses, wide streets, and modern construction predominated. This indicated that the reported memories were not based on the boy's daily life. During a session held in March, Caleb was invited to describe, only if he wished, the place where he believed he had previously lived. Without hesitation, he stated, "It was all very close. The houses shook in the wind when they burned." The team recorded the sentence exactly as spoken. There were no additional questions. Steiner, one of the researchers present, later commented that the boy's sensory precision involving heat and smoke resembled many cases cataloged by Stevenson that involved scenarios of attack or fire. The family also reported behaviors that drew the group's attention. During a strong storm, Caleb avoided standing near the window, and when his mother asked why, he murmured, "It was like this before I ran." He could not explain what he meant. This type of fragmented memory, restricted to sensations and small images, was the most common pattern observed by Stevenson in children who supposedly recalled previous lives. In parallel with behavioral observation, the team conducted a meticulous analysis of the constructions portrayed in Caleb's drawings. One of the assistants identified a strong resemblance to villages in Central Europe from the early 20th century, especially in the Galicia region, locations marked by conflicts and fires during the First World War. The bridges and houses shown in historical photographs were strikingly similar to the sketches the boy had been making since the age of 5. Knowing, however, that visual similarity was not proof in itself, the group maintained caution. Stevenson always emphasized that coincidences are abundant in investigations of this type. Therefore, before proceeding, the researchers presented the boy with other photographs, this time of environments that had no connection to wars, old villages, or destroyed scenarios. Caleb's reaction was neutral to all of them. But when they saw a photograph dated 1915, showing a Galician village before its destruction, with a wooden bridge similar to the one the boy repeatedly drew, Caleb merely tilted his head and said, "The smoke came right after." The phrase was recorded. He showed no emotion nor surprise, just the same objectivity observed since the start of the case. The researchers knew that this type of correspondence was still not enough. The next step would be to examine individual records, names, professions, dates of death, and types of injury. The mark on Caleb's shoulder, long and irregular, suggested a penetrating wound compatible with bladed weapons used in direct confrontations. It was time to cross-reference this data with military and civilian documents from the era. The next stage required documentary precision. As Ian Stevenson recommended, this phase should only begin after all spontaneous accounts were well established and organized. The team then started examining records of deaths that occurred in Galician villages during the First World War, searching for correspondences with the type of injury indicated by Caleb's birthmark, a penetrating wound to the left shoulder with a vertical trajectory. After weeks analyzing military and civilian archives, one of the researchers found a record that immediately drew attention. It was about a man named Marek Ostrowski, a resident of a small village destroyed in 1916. The military report indicated that he had been killed by a deep injury to the left shoulder, likely caused by a bayonet during an attack that involved fires in several houses near the village bridge. The similarity to the elements reported by Caleb was notable, but, according to Stevenson's methodological rigor, nothing should yet be treated as conclusive correspondence. Before considering the name, the team checked the dates. Caleb had been speaking of the bridge, smoke, and pursuit since the age of 4, long before any researcher had access to the Galician archives. This point was fundamental. If the child described elements before any adult researched them, the possibility of indirect influence or contamination was eliminated. With this confirmed, the researchers advanced to an essential stage. They revisited previous recordings and compared every detail spontaneously provided by the boy with the historical records of Ostrowski. The bridge mentioned in the documents was wooden, curved, and located over a narrow tributary, exactly as it appeared in Caleb's drawings. The 1916 attack really had involved houses very close to each other, destroyed by fires, which corresponded to the boy's statements about crowded houses and the smell of smoke all the time. In one of the subsequent sessions, without the team mentioning names or dates, they simply asked if Caleb remembered anything immediately before the pain. He replied, after a short pause, "I was running. There was a lot of smoke, and men with gray on their faces were talking loudly." The assistant who studied the archives later commented that several accounts from the time described soldiers covered in soot because of the fires, exactly the type of detail compatible with the boy's phrase. The family also reported a particular episode. Caleb was sitting on the living room floor, organizing pieces of a wooden toy, when he stopped abruptly, brought his hand to his shoulder, and said, "I fell forward. The ground was still hot." After that, he said nothing more. This type of short, objective, and unemotional memory corresponded precisely to the pattern described by Stevenson in cases involving memories of the moment of death. The team then examined the boy's birthmark in more detail, comparing its shape with the possible trajectory of a bladed weapon strike. They concluded that, in fact, the shape and location were compatible with a descending, penetrating wound, exactly as described in Ostrowski's records. Even so, no conclusion would be presented before the final stage. Bringing all the fragments together and evaluating whether there was, in fact, sufficient convergence to consider the case suggestive according to the established academic standard. With all the data organized, the team advanced to the final phase of the investigation, evaluating whether the assembled information met the criteria that Ian Stevenson used to classify a case as suggestive. That is, strong enough to merit academic record, but without exceeding the methodological limit that demanded rigor and caution. The analysis had to consider 5 main axes: spontaneity of statements, internal consistency, presence of a corresponding bodily mark, absence of external influence, and possible historical correspondence. The first axis was indisputable. All of Caleb's statements emerged before the age of 4 and continued sporadically until he was 8, always spontaneous, always out of context. Parents, teachers, and the pediatrician herself confirmed that nothing in the child's environment contained elements that could inspire accounts of pursuit, smoke, or injuries. The second axis, consistency, was also solid. From a very early age, Caleb repeated identical elements: the curved bridge, the narrow houses, the constant smell of smoke, the interrupted run, and the impact on the left shoulder. There were no significant contradictions over years of accounts, which is rare in narratives of childhood imagination, which usually vary considerably. The third axis, the birthmark, was perhaps the most objective. Caleb's congenital lesion had a shape compatible with a penetrating, vertical, and deep wound, the type of mark Stevenson described in several documented cases, and it coincided exactly with the region hit in Marek Ostrowski's military record. The fourth axis, the absence of external influence, was analyzed rigorously. There was no immediate European ancestry in the Turner family, no relative from the Galicia region, no book, film, or domestic conversation that could explain the descriptions. The school also did not address historical content with the details mentioned by the boy, and no images of villages destroyed by conflicts were ever shown. Finally, the fifth axis, historical correspondence. Although the World War I archives were incomplete, Ostrowski's life and death presented a sequence of elements that coincided with Caleb's account: location of the injury, presence of smoke caused by fires, proximity to a curved bridge, houses very close together, and the pattern of attack recorded in 1916. These parallels did not prove anything absolutely, but they composed a rare convergence. As the team finalized the report, they also observed that Caleb's memories were beginning to diminish. At 8.5, he no longer commented spontaneously on his previous life with the same frequency. This gradual decline, as documented by Stevenson, was common. Memories tend to fade as the child grows, especially after the age of 7. In the final report, the researchers emphasized that the objective was never to confirm a metaphysical hypothesis, but to record behavioral phenomena and compare them to previously studied patterns. Caleb's case fit precisely into the category of a well-documented suggestive case: spontaneous and coherent statements, a compatible bodily mark, absence of cultural contamination, and possible verifiable historical correspondence. The document concluded that, even decades after Ian Stevenson's death, the methods he left behind continue to allow researchers to examine, with sobriety and rigor, accounts that defy conventional explanations. And among these accounts, that of an 8-year-old boy from Virginia, who never knew Galicia, never studied World War I, and never heard of Marek Ostrowski, remains one of the most intriguing ever recorded by the team.